The morning of what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life turned into a nightmare I'll never forget. My fiancé demanded that I wear his mother's 20-year-old wedding gown. When I calmly refused, thinking he would understand, it happened. His fist struck my face without warning, knocking me to the ground. And right there, in that room, his mother stood watching, silent and satisfied, as if she had orchestrated the entire thing. Then she coldly said, "You dare to disobey me?" That was the moment everything changed. I walked away from the wedding from both of them, and before the next day ended, they were already behind bars. My name is Alina Bennett, and I'm 26 years old. On what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, my wedding day, my fiancé did something I will never forget. He forced me to wear his mother's 20-year-old wedding dress. When I told him no, that I wouldn't wear it, he punched me hard. I fell to the floor as his mother stood by, arms crossed, cold eyes watching with approval. And if that wasn't enough, she had the nerve to say, "How dare you defy me?" That was it. That was the moment I realized I couldn't go through with this wedding. I walked away from everything right then and there. Within 24 hours, both of them, my ex-fiancé and his controlling mother, were behind bars. But how did it all get to that point? Let me take you back to the beginning. I grew up in a quiet coastal town called Lakewood Springs, where everything used to feel so simple until I met Daniel Moore. That was 5 years ago. Daniel seemed perfect. He was charming, attentive, funny, and made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. We connected quickly, and for the longest time, I thought I had met my forever person. We dreamed about our future together. Marriage, kids, a little house with a garden. Everything felt like it was falling into place. So when Daniel proposed in the spring of 2023, I said yes, without a second thought. It felt like the start of something beautiful. We planned our wedding for June 2024, and I couldn't have been more excited. But what I didn't know then was that my dream was already beginning to fall apart. Even before the wedding plans fully kicked off, I noticed things were starting to change. Daniel, the man who used to message me good morning every day and plan little surprises for no reason at all, started becoming distant. It was subtle at first. He'd take longer to reply to texts, always seemed distracted during our conversations, and would cancel dinner plans because he was too tired from work. I told myself it was just wedding stress. After all, planning a wedding can be overwhelming. Maybe he was just tired. Maybe I was overthinking things. But the distance grew. I would spend hours looking at color palettes, flower arrangements, and sample invitations. I was constantly asking him for his opinion, hoping for that spark of excitement I used to see in his eyes. But all I ever got were empty replies. A quick "looks fine," or worse, just a thumbs-up emoji. That was it. No warmth, no excitement, just indifference. But the worst part? It wasn't just Daniel pulling away, it was his mother, Sharon Moore. At first, I thought it was sweet how close they were. Sharon called him constantly, even when we were out together. She'd ask what he wanted for dinner, how his meetings went, whether his shirts had been ironed. I assumed it was just a mother being caring. And Daniel never seemed to mind. I tried not to let it bother me. I told myself, it's okay. That's his mom. She's just involved. But over time, I started to feel like I was competing with her for his attention. And the more involved she got, the less room there seemed to be for me. The first major red flag should have been obvious, but love has a way of blinding you to what's right in front of your face. It happened the day I found the dress. Not Sharon's old one, my wedding dress. I had spent weeks searching for it, visiting boutique after boutique, trying on gown after gown. And finally, I found the one. It was elegant, soft ivory with delicate lace sleeves and a long flowing train. The second I saw myself in the mirror, I knew it was meant for me. I was glowing with excitement when I sent Daniel a picture of me in the dress. I thought he'd be thrilled, maybe even emotional. His response? "Looks nice." That was all. No heart emoji. No compliments. No follow-up questions. Just 2 words. "Looks nice." I felt the disappointment sink in like a rock in my chest. But still, I brushed it off. Maybe he wasn't in a good mood. Maybe he just didn't know what to say. What I didn't know at the time was that he had immediately forwarded the photo to his mother. Within an hour, he called me. "I showed Mom the dress," he said, his tone unusually sharp. "She's not happy about it." I blinked.
What?
Why would she care? It's my dress. "She thinks it's disrespectful," he continued. "She wanted you to wear the dress she wore, her wedding dress. It's a family tradition." My jaw dropped. "Daniel, that dress is from 20 years ago. I never agreed to wear it. You said once it was beautiful." I was being polite. He sighed like I was being difficult. "Can't you just do this one thing for her? It's important. Important to her, not to me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My wedding, my dress, my day, and somehow I was expected to put Sharon's wishes above my own. But Daniel didn't care. He didn't defend me. He didn't say a single word to stand up for me. And that was the moment I realized something was very, very wrong. I kept telling myself it would all be okay, that once the wedding was over, things would go back to normal. That Daniel was just overwhelmed or caught between me and his mother. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. Still, I pushed forward. I finalized the flower arrangements, picked the music, double-checked the catering. I tried to hold on to the excitement that used to come so naturally, but it was harder and harder with each passing day. Then came the morning of the wedding. I woke up early, surrounded by my best friend Maya, my stylist, and a few close friends who had been with me through every step of this journey. My custom-made gown hung on the closet door, glowing in the soft morning light. It felt like a fairy tale, at least for a little while. I got my makeup done, my hair styled, and finally slipped into the dress I had dreamed about since I was a teenager. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I finally felt like a bride. Nervous, yes, but also radiant. That peace shattered the moment Daniel walked into the room. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't emotional. He didn't even compliment how I looked. Instead, he was holding a garment bag. With a strange calmness in his voice, he said, "You're wearing this today." I stared at him. What? He unzipped the bag. Inside was Sharon's yellowing, outdated, lace-covered 20-year-old wedding gown. "You're not serious," I whispered. "I told you it's a family tradition. This is what you'll wear." I shook my head. "Daniel, no. I've already tried it on. It doesn't fit me right. It's not me." He stepped forward, his voice colder now. "This is what my mother wants." "I don't care what your mother wants. This is our wedding. And this is my dress." That's when it happened. His expression darkened. He clenched his fist. And before I could even brace myself, he punched me hard, right across the cheek. I fell, hitting the floor with a thud, my body trembling, my ears ringing. I looked up and saw Sharon standing just a few feet away, arms crossed, watching it all unfold. And then she said, "If you can't respect tradition, you don't deserve to be part of this family. How dare you defy me?" That moment, bleeding lip, torn veil, and all, was the breaking point. I stood up, trembling but steady, wiped the blood from my mouth, and said the words that would change everything. "I'm done." I turned my back on both of them, Daniel and Sharon, without another word. I didn't care that guests were arriving. I didn't care that the venue had been paid for or that the flowers were perfectly arranged. I didn't care about the shocked faces waiting outside or the whispers that would ripple through the crowd. None of it mattered anymore. All I knew was that I had to get out. As I left the room, I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. My cheek was already bruising, my lipstick smudged from where Daniel had hit me. The train of my beautiful gown trailed behind me like a ghost of what could have been. I walked out of that house, our house, the one Daniel and I had picked together, with nothing but my phone clutched in my hand. The weight of silence wrapped around me like a heavy coat, but inside, I was boiling. I wasn't going to cry. Not yet. I got in my car, my hands shaking as I turned the key in the ignition, and the only thought that ran through my mind was, "They're not getting away with this." As soon as I reached the end of the driveway, I pulled over and called the only person I knew would always answer. "Ethan?" I said, my voice cracking. "Alina?" My brother's voice instantly sharpened. What's wrong?
I.
I need you. I left the wedding. I need you to come get me. I'm on my way. Less than 20 minutes later, his truck pulled up beside mine. Ethan jumped out and ran to me, eyes wide with concern the moment he saw my face. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. He opened his arms, and I fell into them, letting the pain finally spill out as tears streamed down my face. You did the right thing, he whispered. No one gets to treat you like that. No one. That night, I stayed at Ethan's apartment. We didn't talk much. He made me tea, let me shower, and gave me one of his hoodies to wear. I sat on his couch, knees to my chest, trying to make sense of how everything had unraveled so fast. How did I go from being a bride to being broken in a matter of hours? But even in that dark place, something inside me started to burn. A quiet, simmering fire. I wasn't just hurt. I was furious. And I was going to do something about it. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there on Ethan's couch, staring at the ceiling, the bruise on my cheek throbbing in rhythm with my heartbeat. My head ached. My chest ached even more. But something had shifted inside me. The fear was still there, but now it was being drowned out by something stronger. Determination. Daniel had laid his hands on me. On our wedding day. In front of his mother. And neither of them had shown a shred of remorse. If anything, Sharon had looked proud, like she had finally put me in my place. But they didn't realize who they were dealing with. I had spent 5 years compromising, shrinking, trying to keep peace. And all it had earned me was humiliation and pain. That morning, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and took a long, hard look at myself. The purple-blue swelling around my eye. The small cut at the corner of my lip. The trembling in my hands. And I said to my reflection, no more. I took photos of the injuries, every angle, every mark, every bruise. I knew I'd need them. Evidence. I wasn't just going to walk away quietly. I was going to make sure Daniel and Sharon were held accountable. But I also knew I couldn't just go to the police with a story and a few pictures. I needed to be smart. That's when I remembered something I'd brushed off as a minor red flag months earlier. Daniel was always paranoid about privacy. Passwords on everything. Shady conversations with people he never introduced me to. He'd once left his laptop open while I was doing laundry, and I caught a glimpse of an email thread filled with encrypted attachments and invoices from unknown names. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. I wanted to believe he was just being protective about work.
But now?
It looked a lot like illegal business. That was going to be my next move. First, I sent an anonymous email. I poured everything into it. My story, what happened at the wedding, the controlling behavior, the abuse, and the punch that sent me to the floor. I didn't hide behind vague statements. I was clear. Precise. I included the photos of my injuries, the date and time it happened, and the names of every person involved. I sent that email to Daniel's closest friends, extended family, co-workers, and even a few people I barely knew but had seen at his birthday party last year. Then I drafted a separate email for the authorities. This one was different. It contained everything I had ever seen or remembered about Daniel's shady business dealings. Names of clients, the dates he traveled without explanation, the odd late-night packages, the fake invoices. I explained how I had once caught a glimpse of a spreadsheet filled with offshore transactions. I sent it all, every single detail I could recall, to the local police department and a financial crimes tip line. And then I waited. I didn't know what would happen next. But I knew I had taken the first step toward justice. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions, fear, anxiety, anger, and a strange sense of calm that settled over me once I realized I had taken control. The email I sent out to Daniel's circle spread faster than I expected. Within 24 hours, I started receiving messages, some from mutual acquaintances expressing shock, others simply sending support. A few of his so-called friends even apologized for not seeing the signs earlier. But what mattered most was the shift that began to happen in the court of public opinion. Daniel's charming, polished image was cracking. He tried to fight it at first. I heard through someone that he claimed I was lying, that I was unstable, even hysterical, over wedding stress. But the bruises told a different story. The screenshots, the time-stamped evidence. The truth had a way of speaking louder than his lies. And then the investigation started. The police followed up on the email tip. Within days, they visited Ethan's apartment to ask me more questions. I showed them the pictures of my injuries, gave them my statement about the physical assault, and provided every shred of detail I could recall about Daniel's business dealings, names, bank transfers, shady contacts, and what I had overheard during those late-night phone calls he always took in another room. The officers took notes. Lots of them. They asked if I felt safe. I said I did, because I wasn't alone anymore. I had Ethan. I had evidence. And I had my voice. Less than 2 weeks later, I got the call. Daniel and Sharon had been arrested. Daniel was being charged not only with domestic assault, but also with fraud, tax evasion, and illegal import activity. Sharon, it turned out, was deeply involved in his financial schemes, signing off on fake contracts, laundering money through one of her charity events, and lying to cover for her son. I sat in Ethan's kitchen, holding my cup of tea, completely still as the officer on the other end of the phone said, "They're both in custody." For a moment, I didn't speak. I just stared at the wall, absorbing the weight of it all. And then I whispered, "Thank you." They had finally been caught. When I hung up the phone, I didn't cry. I thought I would. I thought the floodgates would burst open, but instead, a deep, quiet calm settled over me.
Not joy.
Not celebration. Closure. They were behind bars. The people who had tried to control, manipulate, and hurt me, who thought I would stay silent, were finally facing the consequences of their actions. Ethan walked into the kitchen a few minutes later and saw the look on my face. "They got them, didn't they?" he asked, setting his phone down. I nodded. "They're both in jail." He sat down across from me, smiled softly, and said, "Told you. You're stronger than they ever gave you credit for." And he was right. But even with the arrests, the emotional toll didn't vanish. That night, I lay in bed thinking about everything I'd been through. 5 years of a relationship I thought was based on love, months of manipulation, and a wedding day that ended in violence. I kept thinking, how did I not see it sooner? The truth was, I had seen it. I just ignored it. I wanted so badly to believe in the version of Daniel he showed me in the beginning that I excused the red flags when they started showing up. But not anymore. I made the decision to start therapy. At first, I was hesitant. The idea of sitting down and reliving everything felt overwhelming. But as soon as I walked into that cozy office and met Dr. Lin, something shifted. She didn't look at me with pity. She looked at me with understanding. And the more I spoke, the more I started to unravel all the things I had buried, how I had lost pieces of myself over the years, how I had made myself small to keep peace, how I had mistaken control for love. Week by week, I started to feel lighter. I learned to forgive myself, not for what had happened, but for staying in a situation that had hurt me for so long. And for the first time in a long time, I began to understand what healing actually felt like. Therapy wasn't just a place to talk. It became the foundation of my rebuilding. Dr. Lin helped me uncover something I hadn't even realized. Over the years, I had stopped living for myself. I had wrapped so much of my identity around Daniel, his needs, his dreams, his moods, that I had forgotten what I wanted. So I made a list. It wasn't fancy, just a piece of lined paper with a heading that read, "What makes me feel alive?" Underneath, I jotted things I had long forgotten I loved. Painting, walking barefoot in the grass, reading thrillers late at night, Sunday pancakes, dancing to music while cooking, the sound of rain against my bedroom window. Small things, but they were mine. I decided to reconnect with those parts of myself, one by one. I signed up for an evening painting class at the local community center. On the first day, I was nervous, afraid I'd forgotten how to create without someone watching or judging. But when I dipped my brush into a palette of color and swept it across the canvas, something inside me lit up. I started going on weekend hikes with Ethan. We explored Lakewood Springs forest trails, talked about everything and nothing, and shared laughs that reminded me how good it felt to simply exist without fear. Even reconnected with Maya, who had been by my side during the wedding chaos. She hadn't blamed me for disappearing, just hugged me when we met again and said, "I'm proud of you." I was rebuilding, not all at once, but steadily, like a broken vase being put back together piece by piece. Only this time, I was the one holding the glue. But some days were still hard. There were mornings I woke up feeling that heavy weight in my chest. There were nights when I'd hear a love song or see a wedding post online and feel that ache for the life I thought I'd have. I still grieved that future. The wedding dance, the honeymoon, the shared apartment full of laughter. But I also knew that letting go of that future had made space for something else, a life that was truly mine. Several weeks passed. The bruises on my face faded, but the memories remained. The legal process moved quickly. Thanks to the financial records I'd provided and the testimonies of a few of Daniel's former coworkers, who, it turned out, had long suspected he and Sharon were laundering money, the charges stuck. Daniel was facing multiple counts of financial fraud, tax evasion, and domestic assault. Sharon, on the other hand, was being charged for her role in the fraud and for witness intimidation, since it was clear she had encouraged Daniel's violent behavior and tried to suppress the truth afterward. The news of their arrests spread fast around Lakewood Springs. For a while, I couldn't even go to the grocery store without someone approaching me. "Alina, I had no idea. You were so brave. I'm so sorry for what you went through." And then one day I got a letter. It was handwritten and delivered to Ethan's mailbox. The return address stopped me cold. It was from Henry Moore, Daniel's father. I had met him once or twice. He was quiet, reserved, always lingering at the edge of family gatherings like a shadow. He rarely spoke, and when he did, his words were clipped, guarded. I had assumed he was just distant. But the letter he sent me was different. In it he wrote, "Alina, I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to say I'm sorry for not stepping in when I should have. I knew Sharon had a grip on Daniel. I saw what was happening and chose to stay silent because I didn't think it was my place. That was cowardly. I should have stopped it. I should have helped you. I hope you find peace." I read the letter twice, then 3 times. Tears welled in my eyes, not because it fixed anything, but because it acknowledged the truth. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining it. The abuse had been real. And now someone from Daniel's own family had admitted it in writing. That letter didn't excuse what happened, but it gave me something I didn't even realize I needed. Validation. That letter stayed with me, not just physically, tucked in a drawer beside my bed, but emotionally. It was a turning point. It didn't erase the pain, but it reminded me I was believed. That someone who had once been complicit had finally acknowledged the harm done. And in a strange way, that allowed me to take the next step forward, toward joy. What was supposed to be my honeymoon had already been paid for. 2 non-refundable tickets to Paris. I had booked it months ago with Daniel, imagining strolls along the Seine, croissants in cozy cafes, and romantic nights under the city lights. But that vision had shattered. The idea of going alone felt hollow. So instead, I offered the second ticket to someone who had been there for me without fail, Maya. She lit up when I asked, "Seriously? Paris? Just us girls?" "Yeah," I smiled. "Why not turn heartbreak into something unforgettable?" And that's exactly what we did. The trip wasn't what I had originally imagined. It was better. We roamed through Paris with no agenda, took silly selfies in front of the Eiffel Tower, wandered art museums for hours, danced in the rain without umbrellas, and laughed so hard we cried. One night, we sat on the rooftop of our hotel, watching the lights of the city blink below us, and Maya turned to me and said, "Do you realize how far you've come?" I hadn't. Not really. But in that moment, with no ring on my finger, no weight on my shoulders, and no guilt in my chest, I finally felt it. I was free. And more than that, I was happy. Not because of a man. Not because of a relationship. But because I had rebuilt myself from the ground up. Paris reminded me that beauty still existed in the world. That friendship was sacred. That healing was possible. And when I came back to Lakewood Springs, I didn't come back to mourn what I'd lost. I came back to celebrate what I'd reclaimed. Returning home after Paris felt different, like I was walking into a new chapter of my life, not the aftermath of a tragedy. I unpacked my suitcase slowly, hanging up the few souvenirs I brought back. A tiny watercolor I'd bought on the banks of the Seine, a pressed flower I tucked into my journal, and a small leather-bound notebook I picked up in a vintage bookstore, where I had started jotting down thoughts, memories, even dreams for the future. There was one thing left to do, one last piece I needed to let go of. The engagement ring. It had been sitting in a drawer since the day I walked out, shoved under a pile of scarves, out of sight. But it still had weight. Every time I opened that drawer, I felt it staring back at me like an old wound that hadn't quite healed. I took it to a local jeweler and asked what I could get for it. He appraised it with care, then gave me a number. I nodded and said, "I'll take it." And then I drove straight to Hope House, a non-profit women's shelter just outside of town. I donated the entire amount. When the staff asked if I wanted a receipt for tax purposes, I shook my head. "This isn't for a write-off," I told them. "It's for someone who needs it. Someone like me." As I walked back to my car, I felt light, like I had peeled off the final layer of grief and turned it into something good. Daniel and Sharon were still in jail. Their court date was approaching, but I wasn't obsessed with the outcome anymore. Justice had already started. They were no longer part of my story. They were just names in a chapter one had finished reading. I had let them go. What I held on to instead was everything I had found, my voice, my freedom, and the quiet confidence that I would never let anyone steal my worth again. I wasn't afraid of being alone. In fact, I had never felt more whole. In the months that followed, I didn't rush anything. I didn't rush into dating. I didn't rush into decisions. I simply let myself live, on my own terms. I moved into a small, sunlit apartment on the edge of Lakewood Springs. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I decorated it with warm tones, indoor plants, and paintings from my art class. Every corner reflected who I was now, calm, creative, in control. I spent weekends at the local market, tried new recipes, binge-watched mystery shows, and started freelancing as a digital illustrator, something I had always wanted to do, but never had the courage to pursue. Ethan stayed close, checking in often, but he also gave me space to grow. Maya and I turned our Paris bond into a weekly ritual, wine and walks Wednesdays, where we'd vent, laugh, or just exist together. And slowly, without even realizing it, I stopped looking over my shoulder. I stopped wondering what Daniel was saying about me, or whether Sharon would ever try to reach out. The truth was, they no longer mattered. The only person I needed to prove anything to was me. One afternoon, I sat by the lake with my sketchpad open and a cup of coffee in hand. The breeze was soft, and the sky was streaked with pink. I watched a young couple walk by, hand in hand, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel bitter. I didn't feel jealous. I felt ready. Not necessarily for love, but for whatever came next. If love found me again, I would welcome it, but only if it honored me. Only if it met the standards I had now reclaimed for myself. I had walked through fire. I had watched a dream burn. But in the ashes, I had built something stronger. A life that was mine. A peace that was real. And a self-worth that no one could ever take from me again. So, no. My story didn't end at the altar. It began the moment I walked away from it. And this time, I'm writing every page. The future is mine. If you found this story powerful or moving, don't forget to like the video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel for more real-life inspired stories every week. Your support helps us bring more voices, more truth, and more unforgettable journeys to life. Thanks for watching, and remember, your voice matters.